Subscribe to The Survival Record if you value the kind of history that looks past the headlines and into the systems that actually determine whether societies endure or collapse. Because, one of the most overlooked survival stories of the Second World War is not about a weapon, a battle plan, or a charismatic commander. It is about dust, crushed stones spread across exhausted fields that quietly helped prevent famine in war-torn Europe. During the war and its immediate aftermath, finely ground rock was used to restore soils that had been stripped of nutrients by years of overproduction and blockade. It worked, yields improved, starvation was averted in key regions, and yet today, in most agricultural supply stores, that same approach is largely absent, replaced by synthetic fertilizers. To understand why, we have to look at how total war reshaped agriculture and how peace reshaped it again. The war forced governments to confront the limits of industrial agriculture long before most civilians understood the problem. By 1939, much of Europe had already been farming intensively for decades. The First World War had demonstrated how quickly blockades and disrupted trade could choke off access to imported nitrates and phosphates. Countries like Britain and Germany entered the Second World War with acute awareness that food security was as decisive as air superiority. In Germany, the state had long invested in chemical nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process, pioneered by figures such as Fritz Haber. Synthetic ammonia allowed the production of fertilizers independent of Chilean nitrate imports. But nitrogen alone was not enough. Crops also require phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and trace minerals. Continuous cultivation, especially under wartime pressure to maximize output, depleted these reserves. The Allied blockade tightened around Axis Europe. Shipping lanes were threatened globally. In occupied territories, fields were pushed beyond sustainable limits. Tractors lacked fuel. Livestock numbers dropped, reducing manure availability. Soil structure deteriorated. In many areas, yields fell not simply because of labor shortages or bomb damage, but because the soil itself was losing vitality. Military planners understood something that modern consumers often forget. Calories originate in geology as much as biology. When mineral cycles are broken, food systems falter. Crushed stone became a strategic input, not just an agricultural curiosity. In this context, ground rock, often basalt or other mineral-rich stone, re-emerged as a practical solution. Finely milled rock dust contains a spectrum of minerals that, over time, slowly weather into bioavailable forms. Unlike synthetic fertilizers that deliver isolated nutrients, rock dust works gradually, rebuilding mineral balance and, improving soil structure over time. Germany, cut off from many imported fertilizers, expanded domestic quarrying and grinding operations. Some of this material was used in infrastructure, but agricultural applications also increased, especially in regions where soils had been heavily cropped. The logic was straightforward. If access to industrial fertilizers was constrained by bombing and resource diversion to munitions, then local stone, abundant and geopolitically secure, became strategically valuable. Britain faced similar constraints under the U-boat blockade. The Dig for Victory campaign is often remembered for backyard gardens and allotments. Less remembered is the emphasis on soil management. Agricultural ministries promoted liming to correct soil acidity and improve nutrient uptake. Lime, which is essentially crushed limestone, is a form of rock dust. Its widespread wartime application significantly improved yields on marginal land brought under cultivation. In both cases, crushed rock functioned as a resilience tool. It was not glamorous. It did not promise immediate surges in productivity, but it stabilized systems under stress. The immediate post-war years proved that mineral restoration could, in fact, prevent famine. When the war ended in 1945, Europe's agricultural infrastructure lay in ruins. Transport networks were shattered. Fertilizer factories had been bombed or converted to wartime production. Millions were displaced. The winter of 1946 to 47 brought additional hardship, yet widespread famine on the scale many feared did not fully materialize in Western Europe. Multiple factors contributed: international aid, favorable harvests in certain years, and reconstruction policies. But soil restoration efforts during and immediately after the war played a measurable role. In West Germany, agricultural recovery was, absolutely central to political stabilization. Policymakers understood that food shortages would, undermine the fragile post-war order and strengthen extremist movements. Alongside currency reform and industrial rebuilding, there was this renewed emphasis on soil health. Liming programs and mineral amendments were encouraged to rehabilitate overworked land. In Britain, continued liming and soil improvement programs extended into the late 1940s and 1950s. The aim was not merely to increase yields temporarily, but to rebuild long-term fertility after years of intensive cropping. These efforts really reflected a worldview shaped by scarcity. Leaders who had lived through blockade and rationing recognized that soil was a strategic asset. The memory of hunger made mineral balance a national concern. The Cold War shifted priorities from resilience to output at any cost. By the 1950s, however, the calculus changed. Chemical industries that had expanded massively during the war sought peacetime markets. Facilities that once produced explosives could produce ammonium nitrate fertilizer. The industrial momentum was, honestly, enormous. In the United States, companies like DuPont and others transitioned wartime nitrogen capacity into agricultural inputs. Synthetic fertilizers delivered rapid, visible increases in crop yields. They were easy to transport, easy to standardize, and of course profitable. At the same time, agricultural policy began to favor high-output monocultures. The logic of the emerging Cold War encouraged abundance as proof of ideological superiority. The so-called Green Revolution accelerated this model globally, emphasizing hybrid seeds, irrigation, and synthetic inputs. Rock dust, by contrast, worked slowly. Its benefits were cumulative and, less immediately dramatic. It did not fit neatly into the industrial supply chain or quarterly profit model, nor was it easily patented. Crushed basalt from a local quarry offered little proprietary advantage. As a result, mineral balancing through broad-spectrum rock application receded from mainstream agricultural policy. It survived in niche circles, experimental farms, and certain regenerative practices, but it lost institutional backing. The disappearance from stores reflects economics more than agronomy. Today, when someone walks into a typical farm supply store, they encounter shelves dominated by nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium blends. These products address specific deficiencies and deliver quick results. Rock dust, if present at all, is often relegated to specialty sections for hobby gardeners. This absence is not evidence that the material failed historically. Rather, it reflects market incentives. Synthetic fertilizers are concentrated, lightweight relative to nutrient content, and integrated into global commodity chains. Rock dust is bulky. Transport costs are significant. Its nutrient release is gradual and influenced by soil biology and climate. For large-scale industrial farms operating on thin margins, the predictability and speed of synthetic inputs often outweigh long-term mineral considerations. Policy frameworks, subsidies, and research funding have, reinforced this orientation for decades. Yet the wartime experience suggests a different perspective. When supply chains fracture, when imports are threatened, when energy costs spike, local mineral resources regain strategic relevance. Crushed stone from nearby quarries does not depend on global shipping lanes or natural gas feedstocks. Modern soil degradation in many ways echoes the conditions that made rock dust strategic in the 1940s. Across parts of the world today, soils show declining organic matter, micronutrient depletion, and structural compaction. Heavy reliance on synthetic nitrogen can acidify soils over time, increasing the need for lemming, again a form of rock application. The wartime lesson is not that rock dust alone solves agricultural challenges. Rather, it demonstrates that diversified nutrient strategies enhance resilience. During the Second World War, governments did not abandon synthetic chemistry. They supplemented it with mineral restoration drawn from local geology when circumstances demanded it. For survival-minded observers, the implication is clear. Food security is inseparable from soil stewardship. In crisis conditions, whether caused by war, energy disruption, or climate instability, inputs that can be sourced domestically become strategic assets. The farmers of the 1940s did not spread crushed stone because it was fashionable. They did so because they had limited options and faced existential stakes. Their experience challenges the assumption that modern agriculture is immune to systemic shock. Remembering the soil story changes how we understand total war. The Second World War is often narrated through battles, diplomacy, and technological breakthroughs, but the capacity to sustain civilian populations and armies depended on fields that continued to produce under extraordinary strain. Soil amendments, liming campaigns, and mineral restoration programs rarely appear in popular histories, yet they shaped outcomes just as surely as logistics depots and rail hubs. When we examine these quieter interventions, we see war as a contest of ecological management as much as military force. Nations that maintained soil fertility under blockade and bombardment preserved social stability. Those that failed faced unrest, black markets, and political fragility. The rock dust story reminds us that resilience is built long before crisis peaks. It is embedded in infrastructure, policy, and local resource knowledge. Its disappearance from store shelves is less a verdict on its value than a reflection of an era that prioritized speed and scale over long-term balance. Understanding this history matters because the vulnerabilities it exposed have not vanished. Supply chains remain fragile, energy inputs remain geopolitically sensitive, soil, quietly and steadily, remains the foundation. If this kind of deeper systems-level history is what you come here for, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who value careful, in-depth analysis over surface narratives. The past still has practical lessons, especially when we look beneath the surface, all the way down to the ground itself.